the comment that he'd already had recommendations from such distinguished personalities as Aaron Copland and Roy Harris, but never one from the Almighty himself. Brzezinski was conductor at that point. Bernstein was making about $125 a week when Brzezinski hired him as an associate. That was for the 28-week season, and a $50 royalty advance from his publisher for the music he was writing. And he was living at Carnegie Hall. He was actually living in a little windowless room there at Carnegie Hall. Serge Kuzevitzky tried to get him to take $12,000, but he didn't feel like he could ask for that. And then he found out when he got there that it didn't matter what he was going to ask for, this was what he was going to make. So with that stage set, the season has just started by the time this section of this chapter begins. And Bruno Walter was supposed to come in and lead a series of concerts culminating in a performance on CBS on Sunday afternoon. Bernstein kept to himself the news that he just had from Bruno Zerato. Bruno Walter had fallen sick and might not be well enough to do the concert, in which case Bernstein would be expected to substitute. Zerato did not tell Bernstein that he'd already telephoned Brzezinski in snowbound Stockbridge, urging him to return to New York, a 4-hour drive. Call Bernstein, was the maestro's immediate reply. That's why we hired him. It was a grand gesture by Brzezinski, whose own first chance in New York had come in 1926, when he substituted for an ailing Stokowski. Bernstein had been out celebrating the night before. He had one of his pieces performed by a friend of his, and so they had gone out afterwards and celebrated this huge success and had gotten great reviews in the New York Times. Bernstein got home sometime between 4 o'clock and dawn, depending upon which account is consulted. It's not true I stayed up all night studying, he told a reporter later. At 9 a.m., Bruno Zerato phoned. As Bernstein remembered the call 30 years later, Zerato said, well, this is it. You have to conduct at 3 o'clock this afternoon. No chance of a rehearsal. Bruno Walter's all wrapped up in blankets at the hotel and says he'd be happy to go over the scores with you. Bruno Walter was kindness personified when they looked through the toughest work in the program, Strauss's Don Quixote. He showed me a few tricky spots where he cut off here, or didn't cut off there, and here you give an extra upbeat and so on. And then I just had to hang around. The music that afternoon had been planned into the time slot of the broadcast sponsors, the United States Rubber Company. The first half of the program consisted of Schumann's Manfred Overture, a grand work of symphonic stature, and the well-crafted theme variations and finale by Hungarian-born composer Miklos Rozsa. The intermission was followed by Don Quixote, which is in effect a double concerto for solo cello, solo viola, and very large orchestra. The broadcast ended there, but in Carnegie Hall, the audience also heard Wagner's Meistersinger Prelude, which was the only piece the orchestra had not performed recently. It was also the only work Bernstein had already conducted on the Esplanade of the Boston Pops 3 summers previously. Because it was well known to the audience, it was splendidly eloquent in character and offered him the best chance to shine on the Carnegie Hall podium. The orchestra may have been familiar with most of the music he played, but Bernstein's task that afternoon was still daunting. The Strauss had countless problems of ensemble, the Rozsa had its share of rhythmical intricacies, and the very first chords of the opening work, the Schumann Overture, are devilishly difficult to keep together and require a firm and clear beat. The fact that the concert was to be broadcast added to the tension. Radio bound the nation together in those years of the war in a way that no other medium could approach. Bernstein's debut broadcast would become a national event, and the telephones of the New York Philharmonic were busy all morning alerting music critics, photographers, and reporters to the story about to break. Leonard Bernstein was on the phone too to his family. His parents just said, "Oy vey." The return train to Boston was canceled because they had come in to hear this previous night's performance of one of his pieces, so they were getting ready to go home. They canceled their train to Boston. The hotel room was booked for another night. Lunch is forgotten. His mother was telephoned, or a friend of his was telephoned, and close friends were alerted, and all of them showed up at Carnegie Hall for the performance. They picked up tickets for the conductor's box and went back to the hotel. When Bernstein dropped into the Carnegie drugstore for some coffee, the druggist wanted to know why he looked so pale. He gave me 2 little pills, a green one and a red one, and he said, look, before you go on, just pop these in your mouth. One will calm you down, the other will give you energy. One was benzaprine, and the other phenobarbital. The long wait ended at 2:30 p.m. when Bernstein met the concertmaster and the 2 soloists backstage at Carnegie Hall and went over some of the danger spots in Don Quixote. He was already dressed in his only presentable suit, a double-breasted dark gray sharkskin. His cheap tails were still hanging in his locker because he did not own a cutaway, the standard afternoon conducting suit. It was literally decades since an assistant had been called upon to substitute at this afternoon concert. Sitting in the conductor's box looking out at the stage, his mother was overwhelmed by the size and majesty of the place. The 3,000 people in attendance were going to hear her son conduct, she realized, whether they liked it or not. Sam Bernstein, his brother, signed deeply as he saw the press photographers with their big cameras beginning to assemble. Waiting in the wings, Bernstein watched the players troop onto the platform and begin their tuning. A hush fell as Bruno Zerato went out and made his announcement. Dr. Bruno Walter was ill, he said, and the public was going to witness the debut of a full-fledged conductor who was born, educated, and trained in this country. Zerato asked subscribers to join him in wishing Mr. Bernstein all possible success. He will seek to entertain you, were his final words. At one point, and we'll skip ahead a little bit in the chapter here, they were recording the broadcast, and it said to judge from the recording of the broadcast, Strauss' Don Quixote went particularly well in the second half, and there was much kissing and embracing of the solo cellist. Then came the Meistersinger prelude, and when it ended, according to Burton, the house waved like one giant animal in the zoo. People were shouting at Lenny in the orchestra. Some of them moved toward the front of the stage. Again and again, Lenny came out the bow, looking skinnier each time, but always flashing that amazing Bernstein smile. Afterwards, he was handed a telegram from Dr. Kusavitsky. Listed now, wonderful. I feel completely exhausted and completely happy, Bernstein told a reporter. And Rosinski, who had motored down from Stockbridge in time to hear the end of the second half, proclaimed to the press that Bernstein was a prodigious talent. We wish to give him every opportunity in the future. And as you probably remember, he got a lot of opportunities and became one of the premier conductors of our time. That's just a little taste of the beginning of Bernstein's illustrious career with the New York Philharmonic. Okay, I think.
I have to follow